Okay, well, welcome to Rotary, everybody. We've got an exciting program lined up today to talk about how elections work. I can't think of a better time frame with which to have this conversation, so we're looking forward to that. But to get our meeting started is our greeter, Chuck Stillwagon. Chuck.
Welcome to Rotary, everyone. We're going to have a fantastic meeting today. Go ahead.
Well, indeed. Next, we've got Doug Rich, who's going to introduce our music today. Doug.
Thank you very much, President Jennifer. You know what, in light of the elections and of course today's fine speaker, I thought it very appropriate to put together a serious and somber tune for all of you surrounding our annual thing that we do every year here in America. So with that, Dwayne, if you want to go ahead and roll the video, this is a little song for all of you.
Every November, as days grow cold and short, comes a beauty of civic duty, a choice of great import. We are not a kingdom, no czars or tyrants here. Your selection by election is good cause to cheer. Some use polling stations, some use mail-in ballots. We've even had hanging chads or whatever they called it. If you don't pull the lever, you have no right to grouse. You get to choose who sits on councils and in the White House. So please be sure to vote. Make sure your voice is heard. The one you choose, win or lose, gives you the final word. Our democracy is founded on how the votes are counted. So make your choice, let's hear your voice. Please be sure to vote. Be it elephant or donkey, not voting makes your country wonky. So pull up your socks and check a box. Please be sure to vote.
That was great.
Bravo, bravo. Well done as always, Doug. That's exceptional. Thank you so very much. And we've got our invocation coming up with Tim Melhorn. Tim.
Well, good afternoon, I guess it is, everyone, again. And let me just tell you that Doug Rich was a key part of getting Cottage in the Meadow built. So thanks to Doug for that. And also thanks to our speaker, Charles Ross. I always enjoyed interacting with Charles in Olympia when I represented Physicians Insurance. But let's join for the invocation. We're grateful to meet today with Thanksgiving. We had Thanksgiving yesterday as we honored our veterans. And in 2 weeks, we'll celebrate our blessings as citizens in this great nation. Many of us remember and mourn for a family member or friend who died serving and protecting our nation. We are truly thankful for all of our freedoms and all of our blessings. As we think of honoring our military veterans, let us also honor our law enforcement people and organizations. Please protect all of those who protect us. Guide our leaders and give them integrity and wisdom. We thank you that we have such a leader among us today, namely Charles Ross, who has served our community well in multiple roles. Bless him as he serves. Give him your wisdom. Help us to be attentive to his words today. Amen.
Thank you very much, Tim. I appreciate that invocation. Next, to talk about one of my favorite holiday traditions and the opportunity for community service is Rick Fairbrook. Rick.
Now I think you can hear me. Thank you, Jennifer. One of my favorite times as well. I have to start with this sound. When I hear this sound, it reminds me of two things. They're both associated with Rotary and the Salvation Army. First is Project 500, which used to be Project 300, but because of a growing need over the years for helping children enjoy Christmas through the Salvation Army's effort to shop for them, we are now working on a number of 500. This year, it's going to be a little different because of COVID. We can't go shopping with a child. We do have the opportunity to sponsor a child for $75, and you can shop for that child on your own next week, Thursday and I think Saturday from 7 to 10 at Old Navy. You'll have the sizes and everything that the child needs for the type of clothing that you'll be shopping for. If you can't do that, you can sponsor the child. Someone else will do the shopping for them. So 500 kids, that's probably not really enough to cover in our community, but it's a great effort. And Rotary's been supporting that for many years. So I hope you'll join me in at least sponsoring 1 or 2 children in that shopping effort. And I think Carolyn will be the person to contact to sign up for that. And I think she's going to send something out about that as well. The other part I have to get ready for in a little different way here. It is going to be different, but you know, I have to just get in the spirit regardless of how the circumstances are. And there are some things that will be different. I don't know if you've noticed, but bell ringing is going to continue. And we will have 3 locations this year, 2 Fred Meyer locations and Ray's 56th Avenue. And already we have 4 shifts at Ray's 56 already taken. Dave Heinel's taken a couple, John Place and Mike Hummel. So the schedule is posted on the Rotary website. So go in, I think under volunteers, and you can look at the schedule, sign up. I encourage you to do it sooner than later because it looks like they're already starting off and going fast. So I just want to show you how our president was involved in last year's effort. There she is, Jennifer Bleasner, looking great at the bell, the kettle. One thing that's going to be different, of course, face masks are going to be required. So 6 feet of social distancing. Everyone will have to put their money in the kettle. We're not going to take it from them and do it. It has to be direct. And they'll be sanitizing the kettles as well. So precautions are being taken. And but we still need volunteers. I hope and many others in signing up soon so that we can help the Salvation Army help our community. Last year, I think we raised about $10,000 in our effort. So it'd be great if we could do about the same this year in a challenging environment. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you, Rick, for that. And I enjoy that so very much. I've taken the kids through the years, had them help ring the bell too, and it's just so much fun. People are so cheerful. You get the nicest compliments about community service and people being involved. And so again, make sure you take a look for that email and get signed up again this year. Next on the agenda, we've got Deb Sterling as our Sergeant at Arms. Deb.
Thank you, President Jennifer. I appreciate that introduction. Contested elections, that is our topic today. So please open your chat box. Get ready to answer in your little chat box. I'm going to give you a second to get it open, turn your keyboards on, get your cat off your desk, whatever you need to do to participate, because this is going to go fast. So, I'm not going to give you any multiple choice. You've got to come up with the answer on this one. In 1800, both Thomas Jefferson and his opponent received the same number of votes in the Electoral College. Because no candidate won a clear majority of electoral votes, the House of Representatives followed the Constitution and convened a special session to resolve the impasse by a vote. It took 36 ballots to finally determine a victor, which was widely accepted by everybody. Of course, Thomas Jefferson won this election, but who was his opponent in this election? Whoa, Teresa, oh my goodness. We've got some real history buffs here. All right, excellent, good. I'm not gonna tell you don't have to pay, but I'm just gonna give you props that you got the answer right. Okay, for the second one, just so you know that elections that aren't always completely obvious, it's not a new thing. In 1824, Andrew Jackson won a plurality of the popular and electoral vote against 3 other candidates, but he failed to win the necessary majority in the Electoral College. So the House, following the procedure set in the Constitution, selected a winner over Jackson. Who became president in 1824? Nobody knows? Who ran against Andrew Jackson in 1824 and won? John Quincy Adams. And actually, there was an interesting tidbit about that. He was only a one-time president because the acronymity carried on for 4 years. Anyway, in 1876, the election between Samuel Tilden and his competitor was contested because several southern states failed to clearly certify a winner. This was resolved through inter-party negotiation conducted by an electoral commission established by Congress. While the other candidate would become president, concessions were given to the South that effectively ended the post-Civil War Reconstruction. Who ran against Tilden and was elected president in 1876? Rutherford B. Hayes. A couple of you got it. I'm really impressed. Okay, so here's the last one. The contest between Democrat John F. Kennedy and Republican Richard Nixon was rife with allegations over voter fraud. Nixon supporters pressed for aggressive recounts in many states. In the end, Nixon begrudgingly accepted the decision rather than drag the country through civil discord during the intense US-Soviet tensions of the Cold War. What year was that election? Absolutely, 1960. So the million-dollar question really is, how is the 2020 election going to be remembered in history? Please send your finds to Carolyn before Thanksgiving. I'm counting on you to do it. Thank you, President Jennifer.
Thank you so very much. I'll need to send in some fines. I didn't do very well on that trivia, but speaking of the opportunity to send in fines and also to help support Rotary charities, there is going to be an opportunity coming to you by mail to do just that. So be aware that that will be coming in your mailbox. We've got also great news. We have over 100 people, I think it was almost 120 people signed up for a feast from west to east this coming Friday night. And of course, registration has closed for that, but for those lucky folks that registered, I can't wait to see you on Friday. So we'll be looking forward to that. So now with our speaker introduction is Randy Beeler. Randy.
Good afternoon, President Jennifer and fellow Rotarians. Charles Ross was born in Portsmouth, Virginia, and moved to the Yakima Valley at the age of 3. He grew up in Natchez and makes his home there today with his wife, Carrie Ann, and their 2 sons, Vincent and Lucas. He graduated from Natchez High School in 1990 and served in the United States Navy from 1990 to 1994, including duty on the flight deck of the aircraft carrier USS Kitty Hawk during the Persian Gulf War. He received an associate's degree from Yakima Valley College and an associate's degree from Mount Hood Community College in funeral service and mortuary science. Charles is a licensed funeral director who worked in the funeral home industry in Yakima for 18 years before winning the 2014 election to become your Yakima County Auditor. Before serving as Yakima County Auditor, he was a member of the Natchez Town Council from 1997 to 2006, mayor of Natchez from 1999 to 2006, and served as a state representative representing the 14th District from 2007 to 2014. His involvement in the community includes serving on the board of the Yakima County Health District as a member of the Natchez Lions Club and as a lifetime member of the Veterans of Foreign Wars Post 379. He was awarded the 2010 and 2012 Guardian of Small Business by the National Federation of Independent Business. He was named the 2008 Legislator of the Year by the Washington Council of Police and Sheriffs. He was awarded the 2007 and 2012 Cornerstone Award by the Association of Washington Business, and he was recognized as the 2016 County Auditor of the Year by the Washington Secretary of State. I've also had the distinct pleasure of working with Charles both while he was a state legislator and also as county auditor. He's been a regular presenter during the local government law and justice session of Leadership Yakima, which I host, and he's always had tremendous insights to share. Charles is definitely one of the good guys. Ladies and gentlemen, Yakima County Auditor Charles Ross.
Can you hear me, Randy? Great, thank you. And to all the Rotary members, thank you for taking the time to let me visit with you today. Just a couple things. I found the questions very difficult, especially because I didn't have Norm Johnson with me. As many of you know, Norm Johnson was my seatmate almost my entire time in the legislature. And Norm was alive when most of those things were happening that were in those questions. So he always knew the answer to those Civil War era history questions. So Norm has moved. Norm Johnson has moved down to Arizona to be closer to his family, which, you know, I really am going to miss him. He became a very good friend, as did Curtis King. In these days where our nation and even our communities are so divided, I catch myself oftentimes thinking about most communities have more things going on in them that pull one another together than they do separate them. However, we are in a time and a place in history where it seems like everybody focuses on what our differences are or how I can't agree with you on that particular issue. And one thing I learned from Norm and from Curtis, which is a life lesson I think many people could use, is that sometimes you have to just to agree to disagree and be very agreeable in that process. Norm always used to tell me when we would get upset or angry about something, his words ring in my head today that this too shall pass. And many of these things today, as they have happened in our history and in the generations before, were, I'm sure at the time, incredibly divisive and war causing in some cases. But I think a lot of these things too shall pass that we're dealing with today. Tim, I want to say thank you for the kind words you gave in the opening remarks. And obviously, I think the song was dead on for today. I'm here to talk to you a little bit about elections. I do not have a great big presentation. I'm one of those people that, and Randy knows this from having to listen to me so many times over at the leadership groups, that I like to answer questions and kind of talk more of a dialogue. I know it's a little difficult on these kinds of platforms, but I'm going to do the best I can with it. But kind of just to sketch you a little picture of what goes on over here in this election house, we have 5 full-time employees in elections that we employ year-round. We oftentimes conduct 4, sometimes 5 elections every single year. Both of our managers, Kathy Fisher's been here in excess of 20 years. She is probably one of the best electioneers in the state of Washington. She herself has been awarded many, many times as an outstanding election manager for a county. Yolanda Ariano runs our bilingual program outreach. And she also is a renowned election manager. So I inherited from Corky, my predecessor, a really strong staff in the elections community. The other folks that work in that division also have, some of them have 20 years of experience in ballot creation, production, and the things that are kind of the geeky parts of elections. And I bring that up because I oftentimes catch myself looking at counties that are understaffed or do not have very much experience, and they really do struggle. So I commend the commissioners over the years for putting the resources into this department and making sure we have the training and the education available to our employees to help make elections go smoothly. We've just finished up with the bulk of the November ballots. The team and I had been practicing for several months getting ready for election day itself, but the work really started months and months ago with ballot production. We send ballots out to military members over 30 days early, so they have plenty of time to interact with their ballot and mail back to us. But you know, when I think most people ask about election day, they always ask how many ballots and what's the percentage. This year, we're sitting at about 75% turnout. We were hoping for 80%, but again, there's an anomaly that is occurring that I think is very telling. Because Washington State does automatic voter registration, meaning when you apply for your license or if you interact with other governmental agencies, oftentimes you are registered to vote in your home county, even if you don't know it. And because the state legislature made that change, we're seeing a lot of folks that are being put into the voting pool, as we call it, but then they don't participate in elections because oftentimes they're very young folks or they're moving constantly. And quite frankly, we think elections just doesn't rise to the attention level in their life to participate. So what that appears to do is drive down the percentage of turnout or participation. And in real numbers, we have over 10,000 more ballots this election than we did the prior presidential election 4 years ago. So I stand on that number and say that, you know, the turnout is increasing in elections where people care. On those off-year elections, sometimes we get down into as low as 20% turnout. And, you know, it's clearly not the system that we use. It is obviously, I think, a factor of the voter being interested or not interested in whatever's on the ballot. The first 6 days of the election this year were incredible. Usually, historically, we get swamped on election day where people put their ballot in the red boxes or the post office the day before election day most of the time. And we receive the other bulk of the ballots come through the post office. Well, this year, there was a huge scare about the post office being unable to keep up their end of the deal. And in reality, the opposite happened here in Yakima. The post office here in Yakima County, the one on Washington, has done a yeoman's job of getting the ballots to us every day. I can't say enough good about the post office this year. And trust me, if you know me, I typically am very critical of the post office in many other ways. But when it came to ballots this year, they were off the chart excellent. Like I said, in the first 6 days, we received I think we had, on the first 6 days of our ballot returns, I think we had almost 35,000 ballots come in, which was what we consider an early rush, which helped us a little bit because in this state, we start processing ballots as soon as they start coming in. Some states in the nation do not do that. For the life of me, I cannot understand why they don't process ballots as they come in. Anyway, we went on through and you know, we're sitting right now at 94,000. I think we have 696 ballots in today. We've got about 1,000 ballots that we're still managing that have special issues related to them. So that's kind of where we sit today. I would say when people ask me if any races look like they're changing, I think anybody who's done the math over the last several days has seen the trends are holding. There is no chance that any races would change. Now, a lot of people get angry because on election night, oftentimes it's telegraphed that the races are over, there's clear winners, and a lot of people just put their ballot in the box that night, right? So they say, well, that doesn't make any sense. I don't understand how that happens. Well, it's because we're processing ballots all the way up until election night. And on election night is when the system that we track all the ballot tabulation, meaning how we count them, they're loaded on disks, and no one knows those totals because the software system that we have in all the counties in the state are time locked. So prior to 8 o'clock on election night, you cannot access the software tool to allow it to tabulate or collate all the results that have been scanned off the ballots. So at 8 o'clock, we push the report button. It's the most nerve-wracking 10 seconds any election person has is when you hit print and you wait for it to print, because that is where if something went wrong, it would be right then where either the report wouldn't print or we never ever talk about it, or something would happen where there's a software glitch. But all the software is tested pre and post election. But again, there's a nerve-wracking period there. So the report comes out, we hand out the results, and typically in Yakima County, many elections, we have every ballot is in that report on election day. Presidential elections, it's almost impossible. We had about 0.5%. We had about half the ballots in the total that night. And then we received yet again another half of that day and the day after. That's why it takes us roughly a week to a week and a half to continue to count ballots after election day. But again, going back to election night totals, they are what they are. And historically, if you're not within less than 0.5% of another race that's of any size, the leads tend to trend out the same all the way through the race. Now, if you're in a small race, it's a holistically different story, like was the case down in Wapato, or even here in Yakima. We had a Yakima City race that actually the person winning on election night ended up at the end, they were behind by a few votes, but rarely does that happen. One other thing I wanted to talk about, just kind of about elections. and given the fact that we're in this politically charged period of time, when you look back over, you know, who wins and who loses elections in Yakima County, some days I talk to people who say, you know, only Republicans win the races around here. And other days I talk to people who say there's no chance for a candidate from a Democrat party to ever win here in Yakima County. Well, again, I think as the questions were brought up in the beginning of the meeting, when you look back over time, Yakima County has had periods where we had many elected Democrats serving in many different offices throughout the county. This office, county auditor, we had Democrat elected state house members. It is not safe to say that it's always been this way. So when I look back through time, you know, today, I would say if you looked at the results today, and top two has an impact on that, but we look or appear to be like a 60-40 split on average. Most races, Republicans tend to win by 60%. In 2010, it was that same type of race with a Republican and a Democrat running. It was running at about 65-35. And back in 2000, it was even stronger to the Republican side. It was 70-30 for most of those races. But when you get before that period of time and you start talking about 1990s and the 1980s, think back, those of you who were voting back then, you know, those were the days of Jay Inslee and Fori Baher and some other folks that held these very same seats, and they were winning by strong majorities. And Democrats played very effectively in many races. So I always use kind of my own adult lifetime. In my adult lifetime, the political swing here in Yakima has gone from one side to the other strongly. And if you look at what's happening recently, it seems to be changing some. However, I do want to point out a couple of other things that have an impact on that. And there's been several large impacts on elections in Washington state. One being we are vote by mail. We have been for a long time in this state. I think the state went to vote by mail in 2011 holistically. There was one holdout county that was forced into do it the way everybody else does it. But because we've been doing it a long time, we have very strong procedures, which has helped us. It's helped reach out to folks who have an issue going to a poll station. It helps in the fact it gives voters more time to look at the issues in a safe environment, which I can't think of a safer environment for most people than your own home. The second thing that really impacted elections in Washington is when we went to top two primary voting. Radical change from what it used to be from kind of the beginning of history. It used to always be you voted a party platform and you selected a candidate that assigned with whatever party you picked. Washington went through a long battle. Gosh, I think it spanned probably almost 20 years when the legislature was arguing with the citizens about what voting system we're going to use. Back in the early turn of the century, it was party only voting. In the 1930s, clear through until the early 2000s, we ran what was called a blanket primary, meaning that the voter could pick a Republican or a Democrat. Well, then the parties sued, saying that was an infringement on their voters' right to politically assemble. Worked its way through the court. Eventually, I think it was in 2004. It was instated that we would use pick a party, and man, the voters hated it. I think when you look back at the surveys, less than 20% of the people polled during those elections favored what was going on, the method they were using. And then in 2008, top two became the law, and 70% of the people, actually it was higher than that, I think it was almost 80% of the people surveyed like the fact they can pick a Republican on this race, pick a Democrat on this race, and I don't have to declare a party to participate. To me, that seems like it's a very sensible way to do it. But again, as highlighted by the court proceedings, just because it's simple and most people like it does not mean the state government is going to make that the law of the land. So today, I think you see now in communities where it's dominated maybe by one party, you'll see the same two people from the same party running against each other. So that has created some interesting issues within a party. A couple of other big things that have happened, obviously the ACLU lawsuits that came through Yakima, and we all know the changes that they created there. We have the same kind of concept that was done in the legislative district by creating a majority Hispanic district in the lower valley. We see the county commissioners are currently going through a battle right now where they want to convert those to district only races, which we'll see how that goes. And probably the last thing would be the national message of voter fraud or election issues that are creating distrust in the community. And there's many of those happening as we speak. But I thought that would be a good thing to kind of just talk about where we're at, what we've done. And I would love to take some questions if that's possible. And I'll keep an eye on the chat box as well too.
My question is about hacking. Have you had any instances of people trying to hack into your system?
Great question, Mr. Brown. I appreciate that. Washington State, when we talk about our entire elections department, meaning the voter registration database is maintained by the Secretary of State. It really is an Olympia system. They own it. We all use it. That system has been under nonstop red level threat for probably the last month and a half, unlike anything we had ever seen before. Knock on wood, and I'm very pleased to say the Secretary responded correctly and brought in Homeland Security and some very sophisticated computer folks from Microsoft, and they have managed to fend off tremendous amount of attempts at the voter registration database. Now, two things I want to highlight on that, Mr. Brown. One is the voter registration database, in other words, the rolls as it's typically called, is one aspect of voting. The other really critical part is the tabulation or the counting side of that operation. Washington currently has 39 different ways and software that it uses to count ballots. And then we report those results to the Secretary for just her report. Part of the strength behind that is if you were trying to hack results, you would have to be able to hack into 39 different methods and different software systems. And all of those systems across the county are very simple, meaning they are all maintained here in this office in the basement, standalone. They do not connect to the internet. So back in the days of the Russian hacker question all the time, we always said you'd have to be in the building to hack into the system. And we have cameras, locked doors, and surveillance cameras on all of our systems. So we have never experienced that. It caused a problem for us managing our military ballots. The military members in this country and in this state are given a very unique privilege. They can fill out their ballot overseas, and then they can digitally scan it and send it to us, and then we will count that as long as the signature matches. But in order to do that, we have to access the internet. That's done on a separate system where we bring the ballot down, and then we reproduce the ballot on a home ballot, meaning we, 4 people, create a new ballot, and then we run it through just like every other ballot. But we only do that for military people or people who are overseas stationed. So great question.
Charles, Billy Connaughton here. I have a question about, we're hearing about Georgia and maybe others needing to do a hand recount of their different election ballots. How do you do a hand recount? I mean, I can't even get my head around that, how you do it.
Yeah, so now let me explain it to you from a county standpoint. So we've done several since I've been the auditor here. We had David Taylor comes to mind. Representative David Taylor's race was so close that Washington has these crazy rules right now where if you get within a certain percentage, you do a machine recount. And then if it's really close, you do a hand recount. Well, I said, there's no sense in doing a machine recount because you're going to get the same results. You're just literally pushing retabulate. So we have always operated under the standpoint, when we get close to that threshold, we're just going to do a hand recount. It's very simple. Because of our sophisticated system and how we can track ballots, where they came from, not whose they are, but where they came from, we know where all the races are. So we pulled all the 15th district ballots out of the archive, and then we literally pile them on a table, and they're counted about 5 different times in separate piles. And then you have this auditable visual stacks of paper. And oftentimes it's down to 1 or 2 or 3, sometimes in a differential. I think it was 4 in that particular race where a person won by 4 votes. So what they're talking about doing in a statewide hand recount is literally you will have every county go back and hand count every ballot. I think that's interesting, but I think what's more interesting that I'm more interested to see what happens with is when you have a Secretary of State who just arbitrarily decided that we're going to allow ballots to be counted 3 days beyond the normal deadline. I think that's going to become probably the biggest point in this whole process. I'm almost sure the courts are going to go back and say the Secretary of State did not have the authority to give voters in one area 3 days grace so that their ballot would count. The good thing that I've heard so far is at least they managed to sequester those ballots so they know exactly which ones those ballots are, because you got to remember, once a ballot is removed from its envelope, you have no idea of who that ballot belongs to. But the fact is, I think they'll say we can't count those ballots, therefore that will have an impact on those results in that particular state, which will then maybe trigger other events. So again, that's a hand recount. It's the most sure way to do it. We do it all the time when they're little small races internally, just to make sure that, hey, there's no variation here. And we've been 100% with our software, mainly because we really take our time. And this is Kathy Fisher and Yolanda that I was talking about. They're very diligent on making sure the marks are correct. Anything that's a weird marked ballot, we handle that in a batch with other strangely marked ones, so we don't have mismatches and those kinds of things. So great question.
Charlie, I have a question for you. That something that you said earlier stuck with me when you were talking about the ballots in Yakima County, and you said there were still about 1,000 ballots sitting out there that we were unsure about. And so could you elaborate on what you might be finding with 1,000 ballots that have not been counted? And is this a common problem that happens with every election?
Yeah, so what you're seeing is, what I'm going to answer right now is what I think a lot of people see on Facebook, or they're seeing on these other national streams, where people would say, why in the world is that happening? And really, it's very simple. It happens every single election. Every time we run an election, you will have these ballots that come back that have issues. Number one is the most frequently problematic ballot does not have a signature on it. So a person came here, I saw several of them, and we actually put a person on the ballot box to try to stop this. Somebody came down here, waited in line for an hour. They get their ballot. They're a first-time voter. They get a bunch of instructions at about the speed I'm talking to you, because we're dealing with 1,000 people. They're given their actual live ballot. Here's all the materials you need. Go outside in the hallway and vote this thing. They get out there, they look through their book, they fill out one or some or all of the races. They fold it all up. They're excited. They put it in the envelope, and then they just throw it in the can. And that ballot then is a problem. We received it on time for it to count, and the laws in Washington say any voter who gets a ballot into the box by 8 o'clock election night, and they forgot to sign it, or the signature is mismatching, they have until the day we certify to fix that problem. The voter does. And by law, we have to send them a registered letter with a return address stamped envelope. So all they got to do is sign an affidavit. When the affidavit comes back, we compare it to the signature on file. If it matches, that ballot is now countable. That's what's happening with the bulk of these 1,000 ballots. When you think of the fact we had 95,000 ballots, and we got 1,000 that have people that forgot to sign them, basically, or their signature is changed. What if a person has a hand injury or they've aged? It's really sophisticated on our end. We can watch your signature over time migrate. So oftentimes we can cure that by saying, okay, this is Charles. He, the last time he signed on the record, he was 30. Now he's 60. It looks different, but it's still got enough in it to where it is the same signature. So that's what's happening. Some of them are provisional ballots, meaning somebody tried to vote and they were on vacation, so they sent a ballot up from Nevada, California, some other state. We have to look that over, make sure the person is entitled to vote. And then sometimes maybe their new address has changed since the last time they voted. So we have to pull out the races they're not entitled to run on. So when you hear the word administrative work being done, that's what that really means. And most people just have no idea of how far the election staff goes to try to make sure a person's ballot is perfected, meaning the races on the ballot, you're entitled to participate and that your ballot is being counted. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions?
Charles, why are there, this is Bob Gers, why are there not kind of national guidelines? Mm-hmm. Why are they so, far-flung, from one state to the next state, from one county to the next county?
Well, we're experiencing times when it's highlighted that there is no uniformity other than we have election day on the same day at the same time. Okay, now beyond that, there are federal rules for some parts of elections, like what we have to treat military members differently. There are different state rules across the states. So again, we're a nation comprised of states that hold those state rights very tightly to them, and they want to exercise their states' rights when they have the chance. It also, it highlights, that it's a very good question, and I probably don't have enough statewide knowledge to highlight and compare and contrast. But I would say this, the fact that if you've never done vote by mail before, and say like maybe, I don't know, 3 months before the largest election in the last, 4 years, you're going to try to institute something that's just fraught with potential for error, I think that's a very dumb move. And those states that did not have good, solid methods in place and started sending ballots out thinking it would be easy, and then also run poll stations, that's exactly what happened when we had the Gregoire-Rossi catastrophe in Seattle. It was because they were doing both. And they did, they had some serious defects happen on their processing because they were trying to do it 2 different ways. So a part of me says I'm not surprised that we're having this in these states that never did this before, and that most of the states, ironically, that do vote by mail and have for a long period of time, I have yet to find one negative comment about any of those states, because we do it the same, and we have been. So the federal government the Congress may enact some uniformity to the way we do, and I think it would be welcomed. Another really interesting concept is every aspect of your voting rights is verified and checked here in this state. Other than if you received a ballot and you're alive when you received the ballot, and you may have been alive long enough to vote it, and we get it, and then you've died before we count it, it would still be counted. Now, I'm reading stories of where they're having just large amounts of people that are showing up on deceased voter lists. And I think that's the first thing that pops up when there's problems. So I don't know if I can answer that one. I wish that we had more federal guidance on some aspects, but on the other hand, I don't want them to force us into something the voters of Washington don't want either.
Hi, Charles.
Sure.
Bunker Frank here. I need a suggestion for next steps. I think we've all had kids that have moved around and shifted their ballot, or we've mailed their ballot to them when they're in college or elsewhere. But I've been receiving a ballot for our daughter for many, many years. I visited on 2 occasions with Corky Mattingly about what to do, because she is registered. She receives a ballot at her home in Seattle. And I visited with you one time. But I could run to my desk upstairs and get the ballot that came for this election. And so that ballot may be in this 1,000 that you mentioned that's out there that's unaccounted for. What's the next step to get this ballot to stop coming to our house? She gets 2 ballots, one at her registered home and one at her birth home.
Yeah, so there's a very common, it's a 2-part question. That's a very good one. It's a 2-part function, right? So as long as those ballots are under the same voter identity, which is normally what happens, there's a very small percentage of the population that because of the system change, I have seen people that end up with 2 identities. Typically what they're doing is calling and saying, somehow the State Department of Licensing in my renewal process created another voter identity. So we're aware of that and we're working on that. There are no county auditors across the state that are happy with that. Matter of fact, if I was king for a day, as we heard in the song earlier, I would severely restrict the ability to be able to change or modify your voting record through the DMV. Because they're not elections people. They're not thinking about it when they're doing it, and it causes a problem. So there's a window of people in that section that are, we have a problem with. The vast majority of the people that I think that fit what you're talking about with your daughter is It'd be like if I had two different houses. If I lived in Natchez and then say I have a house up in Wenatchee or somewhere else, or I'm away at school myself or a training for 6 to 9 months, and I want the ballot to come to me where I'm at in Arizona. A lot of times the ballot is forwarded in this state and in this county so that it can run after the voter and hopefully catch up with you. But oftentimes we will send a voter 2 or 3 or 4, or sometimes for those who habitually lose their ballot, we will send them a multitude of ballots. Just because you get a ballot does not mean it's going to count. Our system watches for the first ballot through the door. Once a ballot comes back for Charles Ross, I can no longer receive any other ballots for that voter under that voter identity. Now, some sneaky person, and trust me, we see it, they fill it out down in Arizona and try to forge my signature and they mail it in. It shows up here, and the first thing that happens is it's kicked out because we already have a ballot for that person. Then the second thing that happens is we analyze the ballot and we go through a process to figure out who signed it. And a lot of times the 2 or 3 voting issues that stand out in my mind where I know I talked to somebody who probably didn't do the right thing, it was the mom of a college kid. Where we got a ballot back, it didn't match. The signature was not what we had on file. We attempted to contact the voter by phone, and the person said, well, I never filled out my ballot. It gets mailed to my house. So then the second call is to the house and speak to the parent. And the parent says, well, I knew how my son or daughter would vote, so I went ahead and filled it out. I do everything else for him. And, and we always say, you really need to think about that when you do that. And you probably should never, ever do that again. And that doesn't happen very often. But when I put on the honesty hat, those have been the couple times where we strongly suspect that ballot may have been filled out by someone else, which is the weakness to vote by mail voting in your home, is that you, the voter, have to take on a heightened level of ballot protection. You know, and if I'm filling out my own kid's ballot, I mean, I'm not going to go down that road, right, with a parent and their child. But again, doesn't happen very often. But with your particular issue, you also don't have the ability to call me and tell me what you just told me and then have me delete her voting status. It can't be done. It has to be the voter contacting us saying, I want this fixed, resolved, changed, or my address formally changed. So again, I'm gonna, if I can, ask you to call, call us. Call me at 574-1340, 574-1340, ask to talk to Kathy Fisher, and we will make sure that we do the best we can to fix this. And it probably requires us sending something to her to fill out and send back, and that's probably the break in the chain. Great question. Next.
Charlie. Go ahead, Carter.
My question is, what if Bunker Frank's daughter, who now lives in King County, I think, sends in if she sent in one to King County and sent in one to Yakima County, would the King County and Yakima counties converse and possibly catch such a double vote?
Right. The new vote law system was really designed and enhanced for that very purpose. We get a huge amount of ballots from students that are all over the state. I mean, they don't turn out in strong percentages most of the time, but those who do, you know, if you have a home register here in Yakima and you're attending UW or a school over there in the Seattle area, and you fill out a ballot that you receive from the student hub, we're almost to the point where it's perfect, where they can print out your home ballot. But even if they didn't, and they print out a provisional ballot for the voter over there and they fill it all out and they throw it in the King County drop box, that ballot will be checked in through their systems as a received ballot and then routed to me for final processing and handling. Again, so usually the master system knows.
I must have asked
What's that?
The question wrong. My question is, let's say she just simply registers in King County, and it's not a provisional ballot. She gets a ballot for King County. She submits it as, but also in her name, another one is submitted in Yakima County. Is there a cross check?
Yeah. So the system is real time now. That's one of the reasons why we used to have the big delay where you couldn't play in an election more than 7 or 10 days before, because we used to black out the system, meaning we wouldn't let people do that because we couldn't track it. Now it's real time. So the minute she hits send over there or upload in the system that I'm registering this person as a King County voter now, it will immediately tell us, do not accept any other ballot from her. She is a King County registered voter. And the analogy I use is if a person gets in their car and starts driving over from Issaquah or somewhere over there, and they register over there, which it's not as easy as some people think. But anyway, you go through that, you register, you get a ballot, and you vote it, right? And then you think, okay, I'm going to drive over the mountain. I'm going to hit Kittitas County. I'm going to do the same thing. You pull into King County, you present your credentials, and if you're the same person, the King County or Kittitas Jerry up there, his people are going to tell the voter, I'm sorry, you've already logged a ballot in King County. You're now prevented from voting anywhere in the state of Washington. Hopefully that answers your question.
It doesn't.
Well, then what are you saying?
Example, Bunker Frank has a daughter who has a registered residence and a ballot in Yakima County. She also, on her own, has a ballot in King County. This has been in existence for a while. Bunker's tried to get this changed and has been unsuccessful for years now. So how is that caught if it is voted both in Yakima County and both in King County? Is there any cross verification between the two counties?
I can tell you that right now, yes, there is. It's one system. So I'm interested to help her figure this out, because I'm sure if I pull up her information in the system, there'll be all these different evolutions that have happened. But I'm also never opposed to saying that if there's a problem, and I've seen a couple of these this year where one person had two different identities in the system, because as the new system was built, if you were a voter that had an not extremely, but an older set of credentials, like the old driver's license and all those kinds of things, there is a gap where we're seeing a person can fall through the crack and get two different ballots, but you're one person. And that's what I'm saying, where if she's one of those folks, we definitely want to work on that, because we need to blend those two together. But going forward, and really what we've been doing for the last 2 years, is really specifically designed to prevent that. Because my analogy of if you register in one county, then drive to the next and attempt to register, as long as they haven't received a ballot, when this is where I think you guys are tripping on this, if you haven't turned the ballot back in, you have the right to change your status all the way up until 8 o'clock election night. And all those 400 people that were standing out there, if they would have registered in Kittitas County, drove down here, and then they had a filled out ballot in their pocket, and they were going to dump it in the system, the minute we changed and issued them the ballot, or they do it themselves through the download, that other ballot cannot be counted, no matter where you turn it in. And those are part of the 1,000 ballots that I was talking about a few minutes ago, where we're combing through that, making sure that these are the ballots that are supposed to be counted for this person, because this is where they registered last.
Thank you.
So again, Bunker, give us a call. We'll work on that.
We've got time just for one last question. I think Russ Mazzola had one.
Charlie, thank you. I apologize if you covered this. I came into the meeting late. I have 2 questions. Number one, when you end up doing the hand count on the ballots, do you hire temporary staff to assist you in that? And number 2, what's the qualifications or training for people to compare signatures? How sophisticated is the process?
Yeah,
teaching those folks how to compare signatures.
Great questions. And no, we did not cover neither of those earlier. The first one I'll answer. It's very easy. We don't have volunteers.
Okay.
Did we lose the feed for Charles Ross?
Yeah, sounds like I can't hear anything else, Jennifer.
Okay. Well, what we'll do is we'll continue on in the hopes he can log back on, and we'll finish up our formal agenda. And then if folks want to stay on, and if we
Sorry about that.
We can reconnect.
Sorry about that.
I
drop off? Yeah. I'm sorry about that. Every once in a while my phone triggers out and then it goes back to mute. We train all the time down here. It's required training for signature verification. We go through the Washington State Patrol system, and we learned a hard lesson with Wapato, and we refined our procedures on that in the fact that there are basically a team of 4 people that look at every single ballot that may have an issue related to a signature, so that every ballot is treated the same by the same people. The only people that can reject a ballot in the county are the canvassing board, which is comprised of elected office holders. The other question that you had was, you asked about signature verification and volunteer help. It's not a practice down here for us to use volunteers. We have on occasion, people will come and volunteer to help us just go out as a second observer to empty out like a red box or something like that. Norm Johnson has helped do that in the past. I've had retired Sheriff Ken Irwin help this year, but actually we brought him on and he's a paid member. But anybody that works with ballots or handles ballots is a paid employee of the county. So it's one of the strengths that comes out of the way we do it, where we're not asking people to show up, once every 4 years and do this. We think it adds to the strength of the process, but hopefully that answers your questions.
Thank you, Charlie.
Well, I would like to thank Charlie for coming on with us today. What an insightful program. And we thank you again for taking the time to be with us. And in honor of you speaking, we are going to make a donation in your name to Yakima Rotary Charities. Oh. And we invite you to come back and see us anytime if you'd like to join us as a guest in the future. So
thank you very much.
Absolutely. So with that, we're going to wrap up with our Rotarians Are Going Places segment with Connie Phelan. Connie.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Thursday. What a great program, Charles. And this actually goes perfect with my segue with a Rotarian Going Places. Daryl Blue has been selected as our Council of Legislation. And this is Daryl. He's going to be serving another term. It's a 3-year term. They only meet once a year, and this is in Chicago in 2019, a picture of one of the other gentlemen, because there is one delegate from each district in the world selected, and 538 members, 8 languages. So it's kind of like the Congress of Rotary. And Daryl said it's super cool. They have headsets. It is a super great thing. And we thank you, Daryl, for representing our district as Council of Legislation for our wonderful Rotary. Thank you very much. And that's all I have. If anybody has any knowledge of Rotarians Going Places, please let Carolyn or I know. We would love to make an announcement and pass on the good news. So thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Connie. Next week's program is Robert Dugoni, the author who's going to speak about the magic of writing. He's an honorary fellow Rotarian as well. Following that, it's Thanksgiving, so I hope you all have a very wonderful Thanksgiving, and then zoom back with us for the following week where Rod Nelson is going to talk about climbing routes on Mount Stewart. So with that, we are now officially adjourned.